Hello, and welcome to our latest Kinetic session. I'm Kingsley Johnson, and each week I invite elite athletes, business owners, and thought leaders to share their strategies, techniques, and ideas to achieve more. The purpose of these sessions is to provide a little inspiration to help us all navigate these exceptional times. At Kinetic PD, our team of world-class athletes and business trainers help organisations embed the psychology of elite sport in their teams. And we do this to drive high performance and well-being at work. Our interactive workshops, professional coaching programs, and recruitment support services all help to embed the behaviours, attitudes, and mindsets to achieve more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our session, and enjoy. In today's session, psychotherapists Paul Moody and Katherine and Gregg join me to discuss fear and the impact it can have on our bodies. Paul and Katherine also share their professional insights on mindfulness, methods to rebalance the fear in challenging times, and coping with loss. To start off, I wondered if you would be both kind enough to tell us a bit about what you do and the practices you run.
Okay. My name is Paul Moody. I run a private practice in St Albans, Ealing Broadway, and in East Dulwich. I also manage a counselling department in a school in North London. My experiences in counselling go back 12 years. I worked in mental health, domestic violence, education, and also weight management.
My name's Katherine and Gregg, and I'm an accredited psychotherapist and life coach. And I run a counselling service which is based in East Sussex called Inside Matters Counselling, where we offer one-to-one counselling and couples therapy as well. We also run personal development, self-esteem building workshops out in the community, so in schools and other statutory organisations as well.
That leads me into the topic area that I was hoping we'd discuss today. And so the aim of our Kinetic sessions is to provide insight for people during the global situation that we all find ourselves in. And as professionals in your fields, it would be great to help us better understand fear and what it does to our bodies.
Okay. When we talk about fear, what we're really talking about is, an intense emotion that is usually triggered by the threat of, say, danger, or perhaps a thought of potential danger or harm to self and maybe loved ones. Another way that I would describe it would be probably an extreme intense form of, say, anxiety. Physiologically, how fear affects the body, it affects it on a cellular and also a biochemical level, meaning, the body is made up of trillions of cells, and they all serve, different purposes. One primary function of our cells is to produce energy. Now, this can be affected by how you're feeling and also, by what you eat, because, food is also energy, a form of energy. Now, our bodies are environments in which, our cells reside. And if we are in a good place, a happy place, say a place of love or happiness, then this will resonate through us. Your energy levels are raised, you may look good, you feel good, you resonate that vibrancy. People may look at you and say, oh, you look young, your skin looks fresh. And this is now affecting you on a cellular level. Now, paradoxic to that is fear. And if your body's in a state of fear, then the environment changes for your cells. You start to look stressed, you start to feel anxious. This now resonates throughout your body. People can see that, people can feel that. And what it also does, it changes the environment in which your cells live. The environment becomes more robust for your cells. So what happens is your cells then start to mutate and adapt to the environment in which it now resides. This opens you up, or this can open you up to the potential of, say, disease or viruses. On a biochemical level, we know that when we're stressed or when we're in a place of fear, the body releases adrenaline, cortisol, and glucose. Now, these hormones, what they do is regulate the body into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. When your body's in that mode, what happens is your body starts to take blood from different areas of the body that may not need it and pump it into those important areas, which are your arms and your legs, because you're getting now ready to either fight, freeze, or run. And one of the most important areas that blood is taken from is your gut area, which is where your immune system is. Once it starts to take blood from that area to then distribute to those necessary parts, the immune system then shuts down because it no longer needs that energy, because that energy is now being distributed to those important parts. And once your immune system is low, then you are also acceptable to disease and virus.
Just to echo what Paul was saying, about fear and how we respond to fear, that fear is a natural response to a lot of dramatic change, which essentially is trauma. When we define the word trauma, it's when something happens in our experience that questions our security. So, questions where we stand. So what was isn't anymore. And I think for a lot of people, they're experiencing a lot of dramatic change in their circumstances at the moment. And I think it's really important to highlight that fear is an understandable response to the current circumstances. And also how some people respond to that fear as a way of, I suppose, protecting themselves. So, we can steer towards sort of, destructive behaviours, overindulging in food and alcohol or media consumption. So human beings, we sort of go into survival mode, like Paul was saying, fight or flight response, where we are trying to survive the situation. And I think, initially when all of this happened, there was a lot of uncertainty, and of course still is. And as time goes on, I think people are processing the situation differently. But I think it is really important to acknowledge that it's not wrong to feel fear and anxiety, and that it's an expected response. And I suppose, what would be helpful and what we would like to offer here are some strategies to maybe help some people rebalance some of that fear.
Both of you have provided so much insight there. And just to pick up on some of the points, I think when Paul mentioned about the blood flows from certain around the body to get to those important areas that you mentioned, like the arms and the legs, in terms of that fight or flight, and it moving away from the gut area where the immune system is, was really fascinating. And also where you mentioned some of those harmful behaviors. Would panic buying be something, because I know you mentioned overeating and
absolutely, and of course panic buying is part of that fight or flight response, or part of that sort of primal state of being that human beings will default back to, of literally survival. We're going to run out of, so let's buy things out of fear, and it becomes sometimes quite irrational and quite dangerous if it's not managed. And of course, what happens when human beings go into this sort of survival state is it eventually creates animosity and division between people, and judgment as well. So we start to judge one another for our behaviours, and this sort of, I suppose, division of humanity, if it's not rebalanced in some way, it can really become quite destructive.
Thank you for sharing the insight on that sort of primal behaviour aspect, and some strategies, some simple strategies that people could adopt or could be considering would be really useful from your point of views.
I think from my point of view, it's alcohol. What alcohol does is to really repress feelings and detach from feelings. So people were finding themselves drinking more alcohol than usual. Watching the news, I think, is really an important factor here. There is so much negative information being spread throughout social media and the news. So it's limiting what you're watching, limiting the information that you're taking in, because the information that you may acquire will perhaps reinforce the fears and anxieties that you are exhibiting. So, another aspect is conversation. It's your conversations, be mindful of those conversations, because conversations now are leading to arguments and disagreement. Katherine said something earlier which was really important about people talking and anger. And I'm finding that this is something that's very prevalent because people are disagreeing with others' views. And those that are in fear, or those that may live in fear, they are seeing others' views as perhaps dangerous because it challenges their own. So therefore, it's to be mindful of these conversations, be mindful of negative conversations, be mindful of those people that are bringing information to you. Also, importantly, and I'll just leave you with this, caffeine. Be mindful of drinking too much caffeine, because it is a nervous system psychoactive stimulant, and it will enhance your feelings of anxiety and fear. So be mindful of these things. Katherine, I know you may have some information that you would like to impart also.
I'm just hearing everything that you're saying, Paul, and you're so right. I mean, obviously, I mentioned earlier about animosity and division and judgment. People are becoming quite judgmental of one another, and yes, being mindful of the conversations that we're having with one another, and I think, and again, just to stress, understandably so, a lot of people are now in a place of worry and fear, as we're talking about, but worrying about things that haven't actually happened yet. So because so much uncertainty, and of course, again, just to highlight that everybody will be experiencing this situation in a different way. So some people are worried about their livelihoods, some people are worried about their health, some people have lost loved ones or fear of losing loved ones, and people's holidays have been cancelled. That there is so many levels to this, that what tends to happen is people then go into a state of, again, sort of panic and survival mode, that we then have to be 10 steps ahead of ourselves. So therefore we're not actually in the present, and there's a lot of worrying about things that haven't happened. Again, just to be mindful of that. And one of those strategies is around being in the now. But there is a lot of that going on at the moment, a lot of that sort of, 10 steps ahead. And therefore we end up getting consumed, and we get stuck in our heads rather than being present. And, and when you've got a society full of, people who are scared and are reacting to that fear, potentially it becomes quite dangerous. And when I say dangerous, I mean in an emotional sense.
I really do agree with you, Katherine. I think that it does become dangerous. It becomes dangerous for the individuals, their mental health, their physical health, and it becomes dangerous for society as a whole. And some of the points that you've made, which I think is absolutely profound, is for us to really be aware of how this is impacted on people, how it's affected people, and to really show empathy, because I think now is a place and time that we need to show some understanding. We need to be in a place of understanding for ourselves and also understanding for others. We need to demonstrate more compassion and more humility. And there are sections of society that are doing that, and I think a fundamental thing and a wonderful thing that is happening is, and this is people coming together in adversity, is coming together on a Thursday to clap for the nurses, I think is a beautiful, powerful thing. But I think within that, it could and perhaps should be extended to not just the nurses, but to others that have lost loved ones, others that are ill, others that have come through having this virus, people that have abided by the rules, and also just people in general. And I think that's probably a way of rebalancing the fear and rebalancing the anxiety that we are experiencing now.
Absolutely. And the other thing as well to think about is meditation. And of course, I'm very aware there are people who are perhaps not familiar with meditation. And I know myself, not so long ago, a few years ago, the idea of meditation was, well, it was a great idea, but it's something that the Buddhists do or other people do. I've maybe dabbled in it here and there, but I've never really made it a practice in my life until more recently. And I would say in the last couple of years, it's become quite, I would say, almost my highest excitement. It's my priority, because I recognize how powerful it is. And these days, a lot of corporate organizations will even have meditation rooms within their office space because they recognize the productivity that comes out of meditation. So if you're not familiar with meditation, now's the time to really give it a go and practice looking inward. And I guess that's where the reflection, the self-reflection can come, because I know for myself, I've been reflecting over the last week or so about some of the things that I would like to change, maybe about the way that I work, or getting, maybe letting go of some, unhelpful beliefs or behaviours that aren't serving me in my life. I have a tendency to maybe over accommodate myself sometimes with some of my work and my projects, and actually making the most of the slower pace. I've been able to reflect and look at the way that I work and look at, okay, well, what positive changes could I make so that I am a better version of me, and so that I'm also offering the people that I work with a better, more centered and focused version of me. I'm also, very aware that there are people who are dealing with crisis situations like the loss of loved ones and uncertainty around, their livelihoods. And as we highlighted earlier, that there are a lot of different levels to this. And one of the things I would like to offer is just some strategies to those people who are really struggling. And one of those strategies is to just really reflect on your past experiences and, really give yourself credit for your personal resources, the things that you have survived throughout your life in the past. And I think sometimes when we are experiencing loss or any kind of trauma, when we're in the moment, it can feel quite hopeless. And I think I've noticed, I don't know about you, Paul, a bit of a theme throughout some of my work with my own clients around a sort of sense of powerlessness. Obviously stems from fear, and of course then that manifests in all sorts of different responses and behaviors. But trusting our resources, and that humans, we do adapt, and we are actually, the other thing that I'm noticing at the moment on more of a positive angle is that people are now actually adapting to their new circumstances. And as time goes on, as things get more apparent, when we come out the other side of this, I'm sure there'll be more changes we need to adapt to. But human beings do adapt. It's sort of trusting that. And I think sometimes it can be quite hard for us to trust things that haven't happened. But in reflecting on our past experiences and using that as almost evidence in a way, that actually I do have the strength and resilience to come out the other side of this and to see this through. And that, there are some things that we don't have to be okay with. If somebody's lost somebody close to them, it's not something that you have to be okay with. And I think also as well, I'm noticing that sometimes we are putting ourselves under a bit too much pressure to be okay, to just bounce back and be okay. And we have to remain positive all the time. And I think I mentioned earlier about holding both, balancing both, holding our fears and anxieties and acknowledging them, because I think if we don't, we're denying an aspect of ourselves. But also, again, going back to the rebalancing it with, with what's in the here and now, and appreciation of what's now.
Katherine, I totally agree with that. I think it's so important for individuals, and people to reflect or use the time and space, because I think that we're in a time and space where there is enough space for people to reflect, to process, to look back at their endeavors, to look back at, the adverse times, to look at the challenges that they have gone through, and to look at how they got through those challenges. Internal resources did they use to get through those challenges? The most fundamental thing is that most people are still here. And if you are still here, that means that throughout your life, you have gone through challenges, adversities, hardships, so on and so forth. And each time you've used your own resources, those internal resources, to get you through. And you have got through each time. And what Katherine has said, which I think is so powerful, is to use the time to reflect, is to process on those achievements, is to look at those achievements, is to know that you have the capabilities, even in a day and time that you may perceive that you are powerless, that in actuality, you do have the capabilities, resources, qualities, and strength to get through this day and time. I'm aware that it's going to be different for each person. Every person will have their own different perception of what we're going through. And as I said, there are some that have lost close ones, and it's, I send prayers and I send love to each and every person that has lost someone, or perhaps going through their own difficult time at present. But I feel that what Katherine is talking about, especially about rebalancing, is so important, because then what you're doing is tapping into to the treasures that you have inside, and you have everything inside you, and it is about looking inside, because, we live in a society that really sort of encourages people to look externally for answers to certain questions that you may need answered. And, with the work that I do, and I know the work that Katherine does, working with individuals, whether man, woman, or child, we see that it's just about sitting and using this space that has been provided to tap in to those resources that you have that you may not be aware of. Meditation is one aspect. Using meditation to zone inwards, to tap in to you is one way. And actually just talking to inspirational people is another important factor. Talking to people that can inspire you. Talking to people that they themselves are inspired, that they can infuse you, that their energy and passion can infuse yourself. They say if you go to bed with dogs, you rise with fleas, which means that the people that you're amongst, and I'm not talking family members in your home, I'm talking about the people that you liaise with, are a reflection of you. And if you want to raise yourself in an emotional, perhaps spiritual way, then it's contacting people that can raise you, contacting and conversing with people that can help you to see things in a brighter light, see yourself in a brighter light, because you do have the capabilities, the internal resources to work through these challenging times. And as I said, what Katherine said, I totally 190% agree with everything that she has said. It's so important.
As you said earlier, it's a very unique time that we will probably never experience again. And actually, for those people who are, unsure about their businesses or who have lost their jobs, using the time to plan, this is a perfect time to recalibrate, actually, to literally look inwards and go, okay, I've got no control over what's happening out there. What's happening out there is not ideal, but what can I use this time for? So whether it's planning, looking at jobs, or planning on, setting up, businesses, or having websites built, but using the time to plan ahead and to recalibrate and to reboot. It's almost a sort of it's like pressing reset on your phone. It's using the time to reboot the system so that we come out the other side a better version of ourselves, hopefully.
Well, nature is rebooting. That's my view. Nature is rebooting. I think, again, what you've said is so profound. We are in a day and time where we have gone back to zero frame reference. Eventually, do come out of this lockdown procedure, is where do you want to be? I think that's the question. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be still in a place of anxiety and unsurety, or do you want to be in a place that you actually have a fair idea and focus of where you want to be? And the only way for that focus to really be perpetuated is by planning, is using the time and space that you have at your disposal to plan.
Just to acknowledge that we are, we're all in this together, admittedly experiencing the situation in different ways. But, another way to just kind of turn it around a bit is to actually look at what you can do to support other people as well. Going back to the NHS clap, and just to acknowledge that there is a lot of humanity in the world, and if there are people who are going out of their way to help one another. So I think, something like that, when we give to other people, automatically it's, it sort of creates a reaction inside the body that, it feels good. I mean, human beings, we're meant to connect with one another. And of course, we're sort of in a situation where we're being divided through isolation. But I always think even through isolation, human beings will always find a way. We will always find a way of connecting, whether it's leaning outside our window and banging pots and pans to acknowledge one another. But yeah, to just think about what you can do to help others in your community. Just check in on your neighbours, make sure that people are okay, to check if anybody needs anything. I mean, at the moment, I think the shops are, pretty much restocked, and most of the time people can get the things that they need to get. But of course, in the beginning, it was a very difficult time for people, especially people who are vulnerable and people who weren't able to get out. So yeah, just to keep an eye on one another.
Thank you both for some fantastic strategies there, and like you say, things that we can all adapt and implement in our lives. So you both mentioned mindfulness and being in the now. And I wondered if you could elaborate a bit and share any tips for us as well.
I say strategies, but, these things, when they are practiced and applied, they become a way of life. They become just something that you do. But a lot of the things that we've spoken about really are basic mindfulness techniques. And mindfulness is about being in the now, ultimately, because that is the only place we can be. There is a lot of uncertainty around the future, but we haven't got there yet. It's one thing that we have no control over, although we do try to implement control as much as we can. We plan and we set goals, and of course there's nothing wrong with that, but how many times does life go the way you plan it to go? So I think I think a lot of strategies that we spoke about they really are basic mindfulness strategies.
When it comes to mindfulness, especially meditations and actually just reflecting on how you're feeling, I think that's really important. It's really just reflecting on how you're feeling now. What feelings are coming up for you now.
Yeah, just to add there that I think that we have a natural tendency to steer towards nature. So, when we are sort of trapped indoors or being told that we can go out once a day for exercise, I think naturally we do steer towards nature, especially when the sun's shining, the parks, or if you live by the sea, or if you live where I am, the South Downs. And it's like we naturally steer towards, what's familiar and what's comfortable to us, although we may not know it, because I think living in concrete jungles as we do now, we are sort of taken away from that. But there's a lot of power that we get from nature, and going back to mindfulness, that being in the now, because nature is in the now. You almost don't get any more in the now than nature. There's something quite powerful about that, and of course not everybody has access to it, but there's something, if you can just make sure you do get outside and that you do get your daily exercise, and steer towards a green area, a park, or just somewhere where you can take in some fresh air and acknowledge the birds singing and what's around you, presently now, because that's all we have as a guarantee. What's now?
What you've both explained, and the strategies and the ways of life that you both have shared are pretty much invaluable. And like you say, it's that concept of not getting in your head, not living too far ahead in the future, not trying to find ways and methods to not worry about things that have not happened yet, looking after those controllables, and that appreciation and that awareness of your surroundings, and making sure that you nourish yourself both from a dietary perspective, but also from the connections that you're making and the individuals that you're listening to or getting information from is really helpful, I think, at this time.
Absolutely, because ultimately our physical well-being follows our emotional well-being. It's really important to look after your mental health always, but especially in a time like this. If ever there's a time to act some of these strategies and tools and perhaps and hopefully maybe implement them in your life so that they do become a way of life, and familiarizing yourself with mindfulness and what it actually is. Because when we fear the unknown or fear what hasn't happened, we're actually in a sort of false state of reality. And I guess when fear is justified is when the lion is running towards you, and that's when the body goes into fight or flight, and we have to make a decision whether to run, freeze, or fight back. So then perhaps it's justified, and it's not to say that like I said earlier, our feelings are not and responses are not understandable, but I think it's really important to remember that when we're worrying about things that haven't happened, we're worrying about something that is not even certain, probably isn't even true, and probably isn't even going to happen.
To add to that, I think it's also important to know that when you are worrying about that very thing that has not happened, how it impacts on you physiologically and emotionally, because what you think impacts on how you feel, and how you feel impacts on your actions and behavior. So it's important to always be aware of what you're thinking, because everything is perception, it's what we perceive, and it's the very thing that we perceive that can create the fear. So one aspect is also to challenge the way that you perceive a situation, because there are 1,000 million ways to look at one situation. It's just where you choose to stand and see that situation will determine how you perceive it. So challenging yourself is another aspect of, or another pathway towards mindfulness, challenging negative thoughts, those negative voices is another way of as again leading you to the pathway of mindfulness, and being aware of how it affects you emotionally and physiologically, and putting things in place to be able to manage it, to be able to work through it. And some of the strategies that we have given today are vitally important in being able to work through those challenging periods and challenging times. And as Katherine said, when you do something over and over again, when we call them strategies now, but sooner or later, they become habits and they become a part of your life. And that's what's important. It's about forming new habits in the now, healthy habits that can enhance your life and bring about some form of balance, because I think that that's what's really needed now is balance. And hopefully some of these strategies that we've imparted today can help you to really, and we're not saying that they are the conclusive answers. We're just giving small strategies to be able to help you to move into the direction of rebalancing and refocusing.
Fantastic, and thank you both. And just my final question now. What additional support is out there for people?
Well, absolutely. I think that's really important to acknowledge that, there is support out there, and how important, and I hope that that's been highlighted through some of the things that we've said, how important it really is to look after your emotional well-being right now. And don't be afraid to access support, because it is available. Everybody is in uncertain times, and so maybe accessing private counselling is not feasible for some people, but there certainly is a national mental health line, and I know 111 are offering a mental health service at the moment. In East Sussex, certainly the mental health rapid response service are also available 24 hours a day. And of course, they can signpost you to any external organisations as well. So the support is out there. But if you're struggling, and of course, like we've said, it's, so many people are struggling in different ways. But it's important to give yourself some kindness and compassion, I think, for what you're experiencing, that it's understandable and it's not wrong, and that there is support available.
And also tap into your local community, because I know that there are some communities that are offering telephone support as well to vulnerable, or what would be classed as vulnerable adults. So it's tap into your local council as well, because local councils are also offering numbers to support services that can also help with whatever you might be experiencing. And fundamentally, talk to someone if you are going through a difficult time. Talk to, whether it be a friend, whether it be if you are someone that, your religious base, maybe your religious leader, whoever, but do talk to someone. It is vitally important that you do. Communication is extremely important. And I know to be listened to and heard and understood is vitally important. So there are some, as Katherine and I have said, there are some services there for you, your local community centres, also councils. Local councils have a list of a variety of services. Whatever your local council is, contact them and they can give you a list of various support systems for you. And as I said, other than that, do contact a family member that you can trust, someone that you can trust, a friend that you can trust if you are going through a severe crisis. And I also know Samaritans are still functioning. So if you have if you can get Samaritans number via Google, you are going through a crisis where you need support now, or you need someone to speak to immediately, then do call your local Samaritans.
Thank you, Katherine and Paul, for joining me today for a session That was informative and insightful. And the fantastic strategies you shared, I'm sure, will help many of us navigate these challenging times. We thoroughly enjoyed making this session, and for more information on our guest speakers, please see the links in the description. And to learn more about the Kinetic PD team and how we help organisations embed the psychology of elite sport in their teams, visit our website at kineticpd.co.uk. And it just leaves me to say, we are stronger together, enjoy the journey, and stay safe.